We're gathered here. I suddenly feel like dearly beloved, we're at a funeral, but we're gathered here to celebrate the work, as I mentioned, of 11 amazing individuals. They're journalists and filmmakers, activists and entertainers, but they all share one passion that I think all of us here tonight fully embrace and of course endorse. They're fierce advocates of our First Amendment freedoms. Yeah, we can give a thank you. Table 16. It's important that we come together to celebrate people like Judy, Elizabeth, Debora, Holly, Tarana, Ava, Bobby, Karamo, Tan, Antoni, and Jonathan. Okay, they all use their talents, their voices, and the transformative power of media, whether broadcast, podcasts, social media, television, or movies, to report with courage, to call out injustice, to spotlight critically important issues, and change hearts and minds. Our honorees stand up for the press as a watchdog on the powerful. They stand up for victims of sexual harassment and abuse instead of blaming and shaming them. They stand up for America's rich multicultural heritage and champion the stories of women and people of color. They help us see past the stereotypes by presenting LGBTQ people as individuals and pave the way for understanding and acceptance for everyone by everyone. Our first award winner is a Lifetime Achievement Free Expression Award winner, Judy Woodruff, someone I deeply admire, who is truly the personification of integrity in journalism. To introduce Judy and her groundbreaking, extraordinary career, please welcome the pioneering journalist who helped launch CNN as the cable network's first chief anchor, someone I started with back in 1980 in the Washington Bureau of what they used to call Chicken Noodle News, but they don't anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, Bernard Shaw.
It's like homecoming. Thank you, Katie. 1968, out of college, Judy Woodruff interviewed for a job at an Atlanta TV station. You remember that. The boss said she was hired. He told her, besides, how could I not hire somebody with legs like yours? You remember that? Sexism and mistreatment common for women journalists then and still now. Judy was undaunted. She stared them down. She worked them down. 8 years later, she was covering Jimmy Carter's presidential campaign for NBC News. Today, women make up more than half of the newsroom at PBS NewsHour, where Judy is the anchor and managing editor. In 2013, Judy and Gwen Ifill were named co-anchors of PBS NewsHour, the first all-female anchor team in television history. A place at the table has been a career lifetime fight for Judy, for herself and for others, bringing many more people along. In 1990, she co-founded the International Women's Media Foundation, helping women worldwide to get a start in journalism and communications careers. On her groundbreaking 40 years of journalism at NBC, CNN, Bloomberg News, and PBS, Judy has covered 12 presidential campaigns, inspired 7 and interviewed 7 presidents, and received more than 25 honorary degrees and numerous awards. She is a longtime friend of this museum and the Freedom Forum. She is a trustee of the Duke Endowment and the Carnegie Corporation of New York. She has raised millions of dollars advocating for families of children with disabilities. In a world of clickbait and fast takes on current events, Judy Woodruff is the standard for intelligent, thoughtful journalism with impact. For the more than 1 million people who turn to you nightly for your wisdom, insight, and intelligent journalism, and for the women and men you have selflessly championed throughout your career, we are honored to present you with this Free Expression Lifetime Achievement Award.
Thank you. Bernie, thank you so much. You were my work husband for 8 years at CNN before you abandoned me to pursue your next career. You taught me so many things by your example, chief among them, patience. Whenever you start to feel overwhelmed by a huge news story or when the news is coming at you too fast, take a deep breath. And boy, has that come in handy for these last few years. And congratulations to each and every one of tonight's remarkable award winners. I am honored to be here with each one of you. Now, let's be honest, lifetime achievement can be a dubious distinction. She's over the hill, but I can live with that. It's true, I've seen a lot in my lifetime, but I've forgotten most of it. And it won't be long before I forget this too. Besides, I reassured myself with a pitch that I plan to make to PBS to become the first 95-year-old anchor of the PBS NewsHour. People are living longer. We need to be able to identify with our audience. You should see the look on my executive producer's face back there. Seriously, thank you to the Newseum, to the Freedom Forum Institute for this, 2 organizations I have worked with and watched up close and respected so much for decades, as you have stood up time and time again for a free press and for the First Amendment. Thank you to the Newseum and the First Amendment Center. I stand here tonight a lucky woman with a very full heart. I marvel at the women who are making waves in the news business now compared to when I started out, as you just saw. Just look at the women in this room who are being recognized. Tonight, look around. It's extraordinary. My thanks overflows to all the people who've made it possible for me to have a career that I never dreamed that I could have. Starting back at NBC, the late Jack Chancellor, Les Crystal, Tom Brokaw, all of them gave a young green reporter opportunities. At the NewsHour, Jim Lehrer and Robin McNeil, who broke the mold by, yes, let's give them applause, by creating an hour of thoughtful television news and giving me a chance to be part of it and to learn from the very best. Tom Johnson and Ted Turner at CNN, who put 24/7 news on the map and proved the skeptics wrong, as Katie said, by doing it smartly and professionally and responsibly and all around the globe. Sharon Rockefeller for both of my tours at PBS and the NewsHour, holding the banner high for public media and having all of our backs through good times and challenging ones. Gwen Ifill. For her big heart, for welcoming me back to the NewsHour family a dozen years ago, for being the supernova that she was while she was with us, the brilliant, consummate pro, born to do great journalism and to break through ceilings. I have a bigger heart because of Gwen. How grateful I am because the challenges we face today as journalists are greater than at any time in the almost half century I've been a reporter. The number of newspapers in this country that have downsized or completely shut down. The hundreds and hundreds of reporters laid off in the past decade. A business model for television as well as print under assault. The volume of news may be greater than ever thanks to today's amazing digital technology, to social media. But we have to be on guard as more Americans are telling us they are having a harder time distinguishing fact from opinion. No one knows how this is all going to evolve. Meanwhile, around the world, journalists are under more threat than at any point in the past decade. 300 journalists have been murdered in that time in more than 40 countries, according to the Committee to Protect Journalists, and of course, including those journalists at the Capital Gazette and including Jamal Khashoggi. In 2017 alone, another 326 journalists were imprisoned for their work, a substantial jump from just the year before. More than half were behind bars in Turkey, China, and Egypt, often on charges of opposing the state. One more reason I am so proud of the work of the IWMF, the International Women's Media Foundation, which is dedicated to supporting and defending women journalists around the globe. Women like Zehra Dogan of Turkey, imprisoned last year for a news report her government called terrorist propaganda. Here and around the world, journalists are increasingly accused of producing fake news, news that is made up. Increasingly, authoritarian leaders in Turkey, in China, in Egypt, in Eastern Europe, in the Philippines are demonizing reporters as enemies of the state when they produce stories they don't like or they wish to oppress. Turkey has overseen the imprisonment of more than 230 journalists in just the last few years. A newspaper that had been in print in Hungary for over 80 years was closed down last year. In fact, dozens of media outlets critical of Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban have changed hands in the past 4 years. In Russia, the Foreign Office even has a fake news division. Few of us in this room are perfect. We really try to get it right. Sometimes we make mistakes. When we do, we should correct them right away. But no one here practices fake news. The charge is insidious, and it undermines the value of a free press. We don't make up the news, and we are not the enemies of the American people. Having said that, it does us no good. It does the American people no good for us to get into a contest with the political leaders who criticize us. Our job is to dig up the facts, follow the trails, wherever they lead, and let the facts speak for themselves, and be prepared to defend freedom of the press. If I ever took press freedom for granted, I don't anymore, and none of us can. Now more than ever, we are called on to do the kind of reporting that we got into journalism for in the first place. That's what we owe the American people. That's what will keep our democracy strong, and that's what will best stand up against any moves to undermine us and our work. And finally, my biggest thank you goes to the extraordinary PBS NewsHour team. I am so lucky to work with every day. I'm looking at them in front of me, led by our executive producer, Sarah Just, and a team of correspondents. Yes? A team of correspondents, editors, videographers, technicians, digital and social media whizzes. I could go on and on. They are simply the best. I couldn't lift a finger without them. And of course to PBS for believing in us and allowing us to report the news straight, just as we find it. And finally, my wonderful family, my husband Al Hunt, who's had his own remarkable career in journalism, our children Ben and Hemi, who are here, and Jeffrey, who could not be here tonight. You've put up with a lot. I love you all. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage our next presenter for this evening, Susan Zirinsky, President of CBS News.
I have to say something about Judy Woodruff because she is a role model to me, and also we have a long history, and it began in Plains, Georgia. We'll be available after this event to regale you with tales of fried chicken, under the water tower, and a lot of fun in America's Georgia. And you do remember that French restaurant, right? I'm extremely proud to be here tonight. But you know, I was reading a couple of things before I was preparing for these remarks, and I noticed that there had been some studies that said that women feel a sense of fear more than men. Are you kidding? I don't believe that for a minute. And that's why I feel such a sense of pride to be here tonight, to honor three of the most fearless, extraordinary journalists I know. And you know what? They just happen to be women. Elizabeth Palmer, Debora Patta, Holly Williams are part of the CBS News team of correspondents who travel into some of the darkest places on the planet. They're there to report some of the most compelling human stories of our time, often at great personal risk. Debora Patta said to me, "Fear is a motivator." Boy, do I understand that. And if you're brave, it doesn't mean that there's no fear. It means conquering it. And the way you do that is by being inspired by the stories that you're able to tell. All of us at CBS News believe that what they do and what we all do, to us, it's a calling. It's a real public service. What Liz and Debora and Holly do is expose oppression, violence, sometimes in the name of a repressive government, and sometimes by groups who want nothing more than to create anarchy and pain. Our job, and Judy spoke eloquently of it tonight, is to speak truth to power and never be swayed by anyone trying to get in the way. From every corner of the globe, Liz, Debora, and Holly have wielded the power of the free press to reveal the world to itself. For more than 20 years, Liz Palmer has covered conflict from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. She was one of the first journalists to report from Afghanistan after the terrorist attacks of 9/11, and is one of the few who have visited Iran's nuclear plants. And, thankfully, she's actually still here and healthy to tell the tale and shows no signs of irregularities. That's right, Liz? Her reporting on the civil war in Syria earned her the prestigious Alfred DuPont Award, and after a dozen trips there, the Syrian government has now banned her from returning after she reported on the civilians that were being attacked in the siege of Aleppo. Debora Patta, based in Johannesburg, has covered the end of apartheid in South Africa, the election, and the death of President Nelson Mandela. She interviewed a Boko Haram terrorist about the kidnapping of the Nigerian schoolgirls and wore a hazmat suit to report on the rise of the deadly Ebola virus in Liberia. Not quite suitable for a Vogue layout, but she did get home germ-free. Her story about child cobalt miners in the Democratic Republic of Congo spurred CBS viewers to voluntarily donate money to send the children to school. That's after she started her career at BBC Radio in South Africa. She went on to launch, sorry CNN, that country's first 24-hour TV news channel. Holly Williams, among the first network correspondents to report on the rise of the Islamic State in Iraq. She convinced an accused al-Qaeda terrorist to detail the torture he endured during his interrogations at the U.S. prison in Guantanamo Bay. Holly reported on the Syrian civil wars, humanitarian crisis from refugee camps in Turkey. In Saudi Arabia, Holly interviewed the women who risked jail for simply demanding the right to drive. She won the George Polk Award for reporting on a Chinese dissident's escape in Beijing. For these women, who I am really proud to call my colleagues, being foreign correspondents and parents away from home has many, many challenges. But it's also, frankly, a source of pride. When Palmer was reporting from Afghanistan, her son said to her, "Mom, I have a lot of guys at school who have fathers in Afghanistan, but I'm actually the only one with a mom there." CBS News and the new era of CBS News has an unbreakable commitment to the stories that Liz, Debora, and Holly risk so much to tell. Holly was not able to be here tonight. She had a deadline she couldn't miss. Can I have the picture? Ixandra, better known as Alexander in our language, was born Tuesday, 8 pounds, 6 ounces. I think that would be the actual size of a combat backpack, so she was pretty primed. The baby and family are doing really well. As you saw on the tape, the reporting done by Liz, Debora, and Holly is an in-your-face, can't turn away from the human drama that tells every single one of us that democracy cannot exist without a free press. Elizabeth and Debora, come with me. We salute you. We salute the power and the fearless work you do, and I'm very proud to present you with this Free Expression Award.
Thank you very much. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here, and I'm moved beyond words to receive this award. As you can see, we clean up pretty well, me and Deb. I often report from Iran, and I noticed over the years that I was there, in and out, that whenever the newest movie by Michael Moore opened in Tehran, there were lineups round the block. Now, Iranians love film, as I'm sure many of you know, but they adore Michael Moore. certainly for his humor and the way he skewers America, its institutions, its power. And some of that resonates with their own feelings of frustration and resentment and the toxic history of America and Iran. But most of all, when they pause to think, what they admire most about these films and Michael Moore is that he is an American. And so he's not only allowed to criticize powerful institutions in this country and powerful people, but that American law protects his right to do it. Now, in Iran, for journalists, activists, for many young people, this is an awesome concept, something they can only dream of. And that goes for so many young, brave people in the countries where I work. Egypt, Russia at the moment, Syria for sure. They all recognize that freedom of expression, they just know it. It's the underpinning of an accountable, representative democracy. It's freedom of expression that keeps corruption and tyranny in check, and it is worth fighting for. Some of them have paid very dearly because they have fought for it. And tonight I'd especially like to mention the extraordinary female Iranian human rights lawyer Nasrin Sotoudeh. She has been in the news recently because she's been defending the rights of Iranian women to express their freedom by taking off their headscarves in public. I'm sure you've read of this movement. Sotoudeh was arrested. She's in the most notorious Iranian jail at the moment, Evin, and she has just been sentenced to 38 years in jail and 148 lashes. It is in her name that I humbly accept this award tonight. And also I'd like to offer thanks to Z and to my employer, CBS News, for championing my freedom to tell stories without fear or favor. And I also want to give my most heartfelt thanks to my wonderful colleagues who are always with me every step of the way. Thank you very much.
It was a choice between vanity or seeing. Sight became more important. I don't know what was more intimidating, speaking in front of all these incredible people being honored here tonight, or choosing an outfit that met with queer eye approval. My children warned me, you better get something decent because you cannot shame the family when you get up there, and make sure you get that selfie, okay? Please. I spent my formative years growing up in South Africa and fighting against apartheid, even ending up in prison for a while. And it was a very unique experience to grow up living with fear, to know that you were not protected by the rule of law because that law was immoral. And now that South Africa has its freedom, we've forgotten what that felt like, that you could be jailed for speaking truth to power, for exposing racism, brutality, death squads. We've forgotten that so many people died fighting for that freedom. As journalists, we bear witness to terrible atrocities, and we report not just on the fact of war, but its consequences. And to do so, we have to conquer our fears constantly. And sorry to contradict you, Z, but actually, let me tell you, it is scary in a war zone. I am always terrified, make no mistake. We go to these dangerous places, but the difference is we get to leave when the story is over. And that is why we have such a responsibility to use this gift of free expression as often as we can. It's a muscle that if it's not constantly flexed, it will atrophy. And the best way to uphold the right to free speech is to exercise that right with every fiber in our bodies. And we do this by telling our stories of those who would otherwise remain the silent, unnamed victims of unspeakable suffering in Syria, in South Sudan, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and so many other places that you've heard about here tonight. It is these people whose stories we tell who force us to be courageous, even when it doesn't come easily. Nelson Mandela, South Africa's incredible former president, was traveling on a plane once when one of the engines failed. And it was a very small aircraft, and everyone else sitting there was kind of terrified, basically. And Mandela sat there implacable. He read his newspapers, the corners of his mouth turned down. He didn't say anything. He just sat there calmly reading. The plane eventually landed safely, and he hopped off the plane, and then he turned to everyone and said, "Man, I was terrified." And the astonished retort was, "But you didn't show it." And he said, "Aha. You see, courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave person is not the one who does not feel afraid, but rather the one who conquers their fear." So thank you to the Newseum, who constantly upholds freedom of speech bravely. Thank you for this incredible honor. And thanks to CBS, with its such proud history of free speech, for giving us the space to tell these stories of people who would otherwise be forgotten. Susan Zirinsky, our president, could write the book on staring down dragons. Our bureau chief, Andy Clark, and London colleagues, and my amazing team in Johannesburg, Nikki Parkin, Sarah Carter, Mishak Dube, and my beautiful family, Andrew, Kiara, and Ella, who give me the wings to fly. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Kathy Trost, Executive Director of the Freedom Forum Institute, and Jill Geisler, Freedom Forum Institute Fellow in Women's Leadership.
Hello. In the fall of 2017, a wave of stories started breaking about sexual harassment and misconduct in the media, film, technology, and other industries. These revelations toppled industry leaders and sparked a movement toward what we now recognize as a global reckoning. But this was about more than just individuals behaving badly. It was about systems and cultures that for years had shielded wrongdoing and silenced accusers. Here at the Freedom Forum Institute, Jan Newharth gave us a mission. We need to do something, she said. We need to step forward in the search for solutions. And so in January of 2018, just last year, we launched the Power Shift Project as an industry-wide initiative to improve the quality and the future of journalism by creating safer, more equal, and more diverse media organizations. One of the first smart things we did was bring aboard Jill Geisler of Loyola University Chicago to play a leading role in the project as Freedom Forum Fellow in Women's Leadership. Working with real urgency, Jill developed our workplace integrity curriculum as a unique training tool for media organizations.
As a longtime journalist and teacher of leadership, I know that the culture of media organizations ranges from healthy to hurtful. Our work aims to upgrade even the healthiest. Through a curriculum steeped in critical thinking, we give coworkers a chance to have conversations they don't often have and to design the culture they deserve. They talk about civility, diversity, creativity, ethics, and community. We get beyond the idea of what's legal or not, or what's a rule or not, to what do we owe each other and how do we bake it into our organization's values, skills, tools, systems, and assumptions. We're also working on new training pieces to help people become better allies and advocates for the most vulnerable and underrepresented in our organizations. Now that work is informed by journalism organizations, input from journalism organizations serving women, people of color, the LGBTQ community, and journalists with disabilities, and our diverse and smart advisory board. Now, let's take a look at what the Power Shift Project has been doing since it launched just last year.
amid growing reports of sexual harassment.
From Hollywood to Capitol Hill to the media.
The most vulnerable. It could be through being a minority, through being a woman.
Disturbing allegations from 6 women.
How many of these stories are out there?
Be honest with ourselves about what's happening within our organizations.
We push other companies and we report on them. We're not great at doing that about ourselves.
In late 2017, when Me Too revelations exposed sexual harassment and misconduct in many media organizations, we immediately began looking at what role we could play in creating meaningful and sustainable change within the industry. When we convened the first Power Shift Summit, we didn't know how many people would be willing to participate and have these really difficult conversations. The most memorable moments have been seeing the commitment of media companies who want to solve this problem.
You have to have organizational culture change. You have to have leaders who really want to make a change in the workplace.
Our goal is workplace integrity, and we define that as workplaces free of harassment and discrimination and full of opportunity.
Empowering people who are seeing this stuff happen to tell someone.
My father was a big champion of diversity and promoting women and people of color. Diversity and inclusion is really in our DNA and in all the programs we do.
How many people in this past year have introduced the subjects of harassment discrimination into your conversations in ways you haven't before?
We believe that we can improve the quality and future of journalism if we work together and we create safer, more inclusive, and diverse media organizations.
Tonight, we are proud to present the first ever Power Shift Award to civil rights activist Tarana Burke, whose work to end sexual violence and abuse exploded into worldwide consciousness in 2017 with the social media hashtag #MeToo. Please welcome Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton to present our inaugural Power Shift Award.
Tonight, we are proud to present the first ever Power Shift to civil rights activist Tarana Burke, whose work to end sexual violence and abuse exploded into worldwide consciousness in 2017 with the social media hashtag #MeToo. Please, news broke in October 2017 that Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein was accused of decades of sexually abusing women. Actress Alyssa Milano urged her followers to Twitter, "If you've been sexually harassed or assaulted, write me too," as a reply to this tweet. Around the world, tens of millions of women and men shared their stories of abuse and anguish on social media using the hashtag #MeToo. It was a phrase that activist Tarana Burke had created a decade earlier as part of her movement to help African American women and girls who were victims of sexual violence in communities where there were no rape crisis centers nearby. Tarana's movement was inspired by a 13-year-old girl she met as a camp counselor years earlier, who approached Tarana privately and detailed horrific sexual abuse she endured from her mother's boyfriend. Tarana recalled that she could not bring herself to tell the girl that she too was a victim of sexual violence. Tarana is harnessing the worldwide attention #MeToo received to create a global community to help survivors of sexual violence heal. In 2017, Tarana was among the women and men dubbed the Silence Breakers, who were named Time Magazine's Person of the Year. And last year, Tarana was named one of Time's 100 Most Influential People. Please join me in welcoming lifelong activist and Me Too movement founder Tarana Burke, the first recipient of the Power Shift Award. Thank you. Thank you to the Newseum and Freedom Forum for this incredible honor. It's always humbling to be acknowledged for hard work, and this work is hard. The Me Too movement began as a grassroots movement and is now worldwide, and that's no accident. We are in a unique historical moment. And I have to say, in this room full of journalists, that we have to be careful not to squander the opportunity right in front of us. This is our moment of truth. The not so distant past where we had collective action on the ground that was undergirded by the federal government is gone. It's going to take the power of the people, from communities to corporations, to do the work of making our communities less vulnerable to sexual violence. And we all have a role to play. So let me tell you what yours can be. Do your job well. We are here largely because of stellar journalism. You all are the ones that shape how we think and how we respond to the challenges of the moment. You don't have to be biased because the truth is compelling enough. There's just more to the story. In 24 hours, 12 million people used the hashtag #MeToo. 24 hours, 12 million people around the world raised their hand to say that their lives were affected by sexual violence. And yet we keep hearing the same stories of maybe 100 people, if that. And not the actual people who said "Me Too." It boggles my mind why we don't hear those stories, because there's so many of them. There's so many stories to tell. There's so many different directions to go in. And if we keep talking just about perpetrators, if we keep making lists of who Me Too is going to get next, we're going to miss the point, and we're going to miss this opportunity. Here's a fun fact about me. I am a graduate of the Freedom Forum Diversity Institute. I don't know if y'all know that. I was in this, I think the second class, 2004, in Nashville, Tennessee, at Fisk. And I knew John Siegenthaler because of that. And I would, yes, we should definitely give a round of applause for John Siegenthaler. And the wonderful thing about that time and having him there when we were in that program is that he would allow us to come to his office sometimes, much to his assistant's chagrin. We would go and sit in his office, and I would love to talk to him. And he told me one time that I wouldn't last long as a journalist. He said, you have a lot of fight in you and a lot of grit, but you have a need to tell a bigger truth. And this moment has given me the platform to not just tell my truth, but to help so many others tell theirs. And for that, I'm grateful. Our work is far from done. This movement is far from over. One of the things I've realized in the last year and a half since this happened is that people really don't understand movement in a real way. Hashtags aren't movements. Hashtags are tools. They're wonderful galvanizing tools that help bolster movements, but movements take time. And Me Too has dropped down in the middle of an ongoing movement. We didn't create the fight to end sexual violence. We're just here to take it to the next level. Our work is about, thank you. Our work is about healing and action, period. Everything else is a distraction. Everything else that people are trying to make it be, everything else that they're attaching the labels to, if it's not talking about healing survivors of sexual violence or taking action to end sexual violence, then it's not about this movement.
One of my really close friends, Dr. Imani Perry, has a quote in her new book that says, let me get it right, awareness in and of itself is not a virtue without a moral imperative. This is our moral imperative. I urge you to take action, to stand up. It's not enough to just be celebrated if people are not going to stand up for what I believe in. And so this is the role that we all can play. This is the role that I'll continue to play, and I'll be looking for y'all out in the field. Thank you so much.
Please welcome our next presenter to the stage, the White House correspondent for American Urban Radio Networks, April Ryan.
Good evening. What an evening. Ava DuVernay is a filmmaker who turns barriers into bridges. An African-American female director in an industry dominated by white men. She became the first Black woman to win the Sundance Film Festival Directing Award for her feature film, Middle of Nowhere, about women whose husbands are incarcerated. She went on to make more movies with meaning. Selma. Yes. Detailed the historic Civil Rights March across the Edmund Pettus Bridge to secure voting rights for African Americans. It became the first film directed by a Black woman to be nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture. DuVernay continued leaping over Hollywood's hurdles for women and filmmakers of color. Her film version of the beloved children's book, A Wrinkle in Time, topped $100 million at the box office, another first for an African-American female director. Her Oscar-nominated documentary, 13th, probed the links between America's heritage of slavery and the mass incarceration of African-American men. This year, DuVernay will explore the story of the Central Park Five, 5 men of color who spent years in prison for a notorious crime they did not commit. DuVernay's passion for justice and representation continues behind the scenes, where she hires only women to direct her TV series, Queen Sugar. Yes, I like Queen Sugar. I know you do too. Last year, she co-founded the Evolve Entertainment Fund, promoting diversity in Hollywood by providing 150 internships in 2018, with 500 planned for 2020. Please join me in saluting Oscar-nominated director Ava DuVernay as one of the recipients of this year's Free Expression Award.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be here, fresh off the plane from Los Angeles and right back afterward. But I had to come because I'm grateful to the Newseum for acknowledging me and putting me in the same space, in the same room with these incredible honorees. In particular, my sister Tarana Burke and the incredible foreign correspondents of CBS. And I'm a Judy stan. You know what that means? Big fan. Yes, yeah, that's the lingo for the big fan. And of course, hats off to our gentlemen, our brothers over there who are doing beautiful work in terms of expanding the kinds of people that we see on television doing things of all kinds. I can't wait for you to get up here and make us laugh and be happy. I also just want to acknowledge that today is April 4th. And April 4th is the anniversary of Dr. King's assassination and all of the beauty that his life has given us and all of the insight that his passing has given us. So I thought someone should acknowledge that, and I'm so happy that we're in a room like this, in large part because of his work. So this February, a project that I worked on for 6 months with an incredible team of journalists hit newsstands, and I was tremendously proud. It was Time Magazine's second special issue devoted to optimism. I had the pleasure of curating the inside pages and handpicking 2 cover subjects. They made me feel like a real journalist. Like, it was cool. They were like, Ava, you're the editor. I said, yeah, right, I'm not really the editor. They said, yes, you get to choose. It was an extraordinary project. For 6 months, I worked on handpicking every piece of it. For the cover, I chose 2 people, and they let me have 2 covers. I chose a young South African painter named Nelson Makamo, and the first cover was an icon goddess and all-around living legend, Cicely Tyson, also known in my household as Her Majesty. My brief excursion in the field of journalism was deeply meaningful to me. It gave me fresh air and courage to know that in troubling times, writing and reporting the glimmers of truth that we witness and understand is important and impactful. And so in my editor's letter, I wrote, quote, while we live at a time when division is the norm, when biases and beliefs seem static and immobile, when hard science is debatable, when journalism is devalued, when humanity is stripped from those in cells and centers and shelters, when it's all just too much to organize in our heads, art calls to the optimism within us and beckons us to breathe. That's what I wrote, that's what I believe. Art calling for activism, beckoning us to breathe. It's important. And so tonight I want to dedicate this award to someone who did just that, someone who was and is important, and who used his art in dynamic ways. He's a rap artist, an entrepreneurial activist from the part of the country that I'm from, very close to Compton, where I grew up. His name is Nipsey Hussle. He told the truth through his art. The truth of his family, his feelings, his block, his community, his city, his world, his dreams, his demands, his actions, his ideas, his love for his people. His loss has echoed throughout the world. His life viewed as the triumph that it is and was and will long be. This week, I've been motivated and deeply moved by the press coverage of this brother from South Central Los Angeles, specifically an area in South Central LA that we call the 60s. His life has galvanized a press response that has become a real powerful moment for me and so many people who so rarely see that kind of attention given to people like him. The LA Times, our city newspaper, in a front page spread with a huge, beautiful headline. The headline wrote, "A legend in his city." It published a tribute article days after Nipsey's murder, written by a Black reporter, Garrett Kennedy, profiling the totality of Nipsey's talent and intention with great insight, understanding, and sensitivity. I gasped when I saw it. The layout, the words, the way that they had honored him on the page. It was another Black journalist, Nicole Hannah-Jones of the New York Times, who tweeted that the layout and the love shown by the LA Times was, quote, such a profound example of why it's so critical to hire journalists who are of the cultures that they are writing about as often as possible. The depth of knowledge, the intuitive gravitas is so important. Garrett did Nipsey justice, salute. That was her tweet. I can say the same about a piece that appeared today via The Atlantic. Hannah Georgis was the writer. She wrote about the many memorials organized by the Eritrean diasporic communities, reflecting their connection to Nipsey's East African heritage. She wrote with a rare and wonderful specificity that sparked a warmth within me and made me feel so many things. That's a good thing that journalism can do. And of course, the mighty Black press, represented so beautifully from Essence and Ebony to Blavity, The Roots, our sister here, April Ryan, with her poise and presence always representing for us. Thank you, my sister. But I was honestly surprised by the quality of coverage of television outlets, local and national, who covered the story over a number of days with what felt like actual respect. I read and watched and listened to coverage on everything from sports pages to op-eds to international papers. So many journalists rising to the sad occasion with a clarity and a care that I rarely recall for the collective discussions of Black life. It's a testament to newsrooms with inclusive staffs. It's a testament to the talent and tenacity of journalists of color who wrote and reported their hearts out. It's a testament to the courage of journalists of all kinds in a time when you're being callously demonized. But most of all, it's a testament to the man that was covered, Nipsey. Such a genuine brother, a brilliant brother. I'll always hold him in my heart, a heart that breaks for his family tonight, that breaks for all of us who loved and admired him. His vision and voice will continue to ring in my ears like they did when we talked. His focus and fortitude will continue to inspire as it had and has since I first met him, and whose truth, centered both in his art and by his example, calls for the optimism within us and beckons us to breathe. So thank you, Nipsey. May you rise in power and be a reminder to us all to live and to tell our truth as fiercely and as dynamically as you did. Until we meet again. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow, some very powerful speeches tonight. Congratulations, Ava, that was beautiful. And now to present tonight's final award, moi. Bobby Berk, Karamo Brown, Antoni Porowski, Tan France, and Jonathan Van Ness. You know them better, of course, as the Fab Five, the stars of Netflix's hit reality TV series, Queer Eye, who travel the world promoting self-improvement, acceptance, and forgiveness. With humor and heart, they challenge stereotypes and assumptions while giving advice about food, fashion, home decor, and personal grooming. Now, watching the speeches unfold tonight, a few of the guys said to me, "What are we doing here? Why are we in this group of people?" But let me tell you, they have every right to be here tonight, because their makeovers go much deeper than a new haircut or a simple wardrobe change. In Gay, Georgia, yes, that's the name of the town, they helped Tammy Hicks, a cancer survivor and devout Christian, seek forgiveness from her son for failing to accept him when he told her he was gay. All that, and Tammy also got a stylish new look, a community center, and a groundswell of support on social media. The show continued to break new ground with an episode featuring a transgender man coming to terms with his new life after gender confirmation surgery. In 3 seasons, the Fab Five have traveled from Georgia to Japan, spreading joy and embracing the things that too often divide us. And in the process, they've shown every single person watching to see beyond the skin color, sexual preference, gender identity, and socioeconomic status, and instead focus on our shared humanity. I am so thrilled tonight to present a Free Expression Award to Bobby Berk, Karamo Brown, Tan France, Antoni Porowski, and Jonathan Van Ness. The transformations that you all have facilitated, the hearts and minds you've changed, it's truly awe-inspiring. Of course, most reality shows promote drama and conflict. And while unfortunately Karamo was unable to join us this evening, Bobby, Antoni, Tan, and Jonathan Please accept this Free Expression Award for using your talents, but most of all, your kindness and your openness and your understanding to promote acceptance, diversity, and inclusion at a time when the entire country could really use a Queer Eye makeover. Come on up here, you big lugs.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir.
We don't do this a lot.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for this. We truly are grateful. This really is an intimidating room. Watching what you guys do is incredible. And I honestly, up until the time when that video was shown, I really did think, what are we doing here? I don't know if we deserve a seat at this table. But then I was reminded of something earlier on today also. We visited the Capitol Hill?
Yes.
Capitol Hill, sorry. Capitol Hill today, and they're working on the Equality Act. And it reminded me of the fact that, yes, we're not journalists. Some of us are. I'm not a journalist, but I have a platform. We have a platform like no other right now. Eyes are on us, and I see the responsibility that we have, and we don't take it for granted. We don't take that lightly. We are a more diverse cast than I've seen in a very long time, or ever. If you had told me when I was a little boy that one day I would see a version of myself on TV, a Pakistani immigrant who is a person of color and is gay, I would have said that's insane. That's not going to happen. The world's not ready. America's not ready. And I feel so privileged to be in a position where our show could impact this equality bill, where people are seeing that we truly. I mentioned this in season 1, where we're fighting for acceptance, not tolerance, and I mean that wholeheartedly. I still stand by that massively, because our show does give an insight into a world that hadn't been seen before. We're not seen as caricatures. Yes, I make things pretty. Yes, we make things pretty, but it's so much more than that. I use that as a vehicle for true connection, to show that we are worthy of love and equality just as much as anybody else. And so that's why I really appreciate this tonight. And I do feel like, yes, we actually do deserve this. No, I don't mean that arrogantly. I'm sorry, I don't. I just think our community needs to be represented, and we're in a position to do that. And I do want to continue to use my platform. I do want us to continue to use our platform. And there's no reason why a bunch of gays on a TV show shouldn't be sat at a table with you fine people. So thank you so much.
And I just have to say, we're able to get on TV and do what we do because of the freedoms that we have in this country. Not everyone has those freedoms. And the people sitting in this room, you are the guardians of our freedoms. You are the ones that make sure that the politicians that we put in office, or the politicians that steal office, make sure that we have those freedoms. And for that, we thank you, because we could not do what we do without each and every one of you here.
I'm going to keep it really nice and short, because I was just crying there before when I saw Jonathan tearing up. While, yes, I agree with Tan, we are a diverse cast, but we are a sliver of the LGBTQIA experience. And what I realize is that what I hope with our visibility and the message that we convey, whether it's through our social media or just how we behave as people or how we continue to treat people with kindness, I hope that it inspires other people to tell their stories in all the mediums. So thank you very much. And thank you very much to the Freedom Forum Institute and to the Newseum. Thank you for having us. Food is delicious. The fish is special.
Thank you so much for this award, everyone. My mom would kill me if I didn't say. I'm a sixth-generation member of a broadcasting family, and I grew up in newsrooms. I grew up in TV stations. My mom ran the advertising department of my family's newspaper that I grew up like before there was computers, and I like grew up in like newsrooms and was like, you know, cutting them up and be like, so thank you so much for the work that you've done. And I think one thing that I so want to be funny, and I love being funny. However, I think that Queer Eye has changed our lives. It's changed the lives of the people that we've worked with. The amount of love and attention that Queer Eye gets is a direct correlation to how much pain the LGBTQIA+ community is in this country. And so many more stories need to continue to be told. And the Equality Act, if you don't know what the Equality Act is, there is currently no federal protection for LGBTQ+ people in this country at a federal level. And if you don't know what the Equality Act is, please, I urge you to look it up. There's so much really good content on it right now. And if you could just reach out to your representatives and let them know how important it is, because truly we are in the midst of a backslide. Transgender people are so much more at risk to violent crime, and it's so important that we continue to use our voice and continue to use our voices to talk about the stories that matter. And there are so many stories that matter that are not represented right here. Yep. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, that's not here. No problem. No problem. Thank you.
So, what an inspiring night. I am so proud to have been here to host the 4th Free Expression Awards and to celebrate these truly remarkable human beings. I'm also so inspired by the work of everyone here tonight, professionals, and the words of tonight's honorees. The Free Expression Awards are a small part of the mission of the Freedom Forum Institute and the Newseum. Their everyday work educating the public about the press and the First Amendment is critical to the preservation of our democracy. We appreciate your presence tonight. Thank you all so much for coming, and hope we can count on your support of their mission to increase understanding about the press and the importance of the First Amendment for years to come.